Hi everyone, this is Tim Young with Elevate Software. I would like to thank Embarcadero Technologies for allowing me time to share with you more information about our product, Elevate Web Builder, and how it integrates with RAD Studio XE8. Elevate Web Builder is a rapid application development environment that allows you to create beautiful, full-featured web applications that run in any modern browser. There is absolutely no need to learn JavaScript in order to use Elevate Web Builder. The product includes an Object Pascal compiler that emits all necessary HTML and JavaScript during compilation. The compiler can also automatically compress the emitted JavaScript to make your web applications small and virtually unreadable by another developer. You can then quickly and easily deploy your application to the destination of your choosing. With Elevate Web Builder, you can continue to leverage existing Object Pascal language skills to build web applications and use it to create front-end UIs for application servers created using RAD Studio. Okay, now that I've given you some background on Elevate Web Builder, let's go ahead and start showing you what you can accomplish when using it with RAD Studio XE8. In this video, I'm going to show you how to call a DataSnap REST server created in RAD Studio XE8 from an Elevate Web Builder client application. In the interest of saving time, I'll be pasting in code that I've already created as I build the server and client applications. To begin, we'll bring up the RAD Studio XE8 IDE where we'll start creating the DataSnap server project. First, we'll select File, New, and Other. Then we'll select the DataSnap Server category. And finally, we'll double-click on the DataSnap REST application to start the DataSnap Server wizard that we'll use to create the DataSnap REST server. We're going to do a standalone application here just to keep things simple. I'm going to leave the choice as VCO application and again click on Next. Port 8080 is okay for me and won't cause any conflict, so I can just go ahead and click Next again. Everything is okay on this page also, so another Next button click is in order. I'm going to select Data module here as the container, but either will work just fine. Default destination is fine for our purposes, so I'll click on Finish to finish the wizard and generate the DataSnap server project. Okay, so now we've got our DataSnap REST server project, and as you can see, there are already a couple of sample server methods here that were generated by the wizard. What we're going to do is add a new method called getDate that returns the current date as an ISO 8601 string using the date2ISO 8601 function in the system.dateutils unit in Delphi XE8. An ISO 8601 formatted date and time is ideal for data exchange with the browser environment because it is natively supported in modern JavaScript engines and includes time zone information that is crucial when exchanging date-time values that may originate in a completely different area of the world. Even here at Elevate Software, this is important. Our company web server is located in the central U.S. time zone while we are in the eastern U.S. time zone. By default, the date2ISO 8601 function will generate a datetime string that uses the Zulu suffix to indicate that the datetime is a UTC datetime. However, since we're using the built-in Delphi date function, which returns the current date as local datetime, we'll need to pass a value of false to the second parameter to the function. That will ensure that the ISO 8601 datetime string that is returned will include the proper time zone offset. And there's one more bit of housekeeping to address. When we run the Elevate Web Builder client application in the Elevate Web Builder IDE, it will be running against a different web server than the DataSnap server. This means that the requests coming into the DataSnap server will be considered cross-origin resource requests by the browser. To prevent malicious use of such requests, a modern web browser will, by default, prevent such requests unless the web server receiving the request specifically allows it by returning a special HTTP header. We'll go ahead and add this header in the DataSnap server web modules before dispatch event handler. This code simply tells the browser that yes, the DataSnap server will accept cross-origin requests from the local host domain, which is where the Elevate Web Builder client application will be executed from. Okay, so we've got our DataSnap server all set up, so let's go ahead and save everything. Now we can go ahead and run the DataSnap server. Let's click on the Start button to start the DataSnap server. And then the Open Browser button to test things out in the browser. Everything seems to be working just fine, so let's go straight to the server functions to make sure that we can see our getDate method. And there's our getDate method. Let's try it out. And there's our response. The current date formatted in ISO 8601 format. Okay, let's leave things there and move over to the Elevate Web Builder IDE so that we can start building the client application that we'll use to call our DataSnap server method. Okay, we'll begin by clicking on the New Project link on the Welcome page to start a new project. We'll just use the default tform form class here. So we've got our blank form in our new project, and we need to start setting up our server requests so that we can properly call the DataSnap server method. First, we'll drop a tserver request component on the form. And now we're going to cheat a little bit and just hard code the REST URL for the DataSnap server method for our server request. This is easy to discover with a little browser snooping, which is what we'll be doing by bringing the browser back up and hitting the F12 key to bring up the developer tools in the browser. We'll then select the Network tab and click on the green Start button to start capturing network activity in the browser. We'll now just click on the Execute button again and then copy the URL for the getDate method directly from the captured data. We can now go back into the Elevate Web Builder IDE and test the URL in the tserver request component. Now we'll click on the Test button to verify that everything is working. We've got a good response, so we can click on OK and return to the form designer. We're done with the tserver request component for now. I'll now need to lay a little groundwork before proceeding. DataSnap REST methods return the results as a JSON object with a single array property called result. This is a little different than what the persistence functionality in Elevate Web Builder expects for JSON responses. So I've added a base tPersistent descendant class to Elevate Web Builder that handles these details for you. The class is called tDataSnapResult and can be found in the Web DSnap unit. Most of this is just boring boilerplate stuff, but the important method is the virtual abstract load value method, which is used by descendant classes to load a datasnap result value. It is passed a t-reader to use for reading result values, along with the index of the value in the result array so that you know which result value you're reading. In addition, this class overrides the assign method and adds the necessary code to allow you to assign a t-server request instance directly to the t-datasnap result instance. This will automatically load the response content from the server request into the t-datasnap result instance. Okay, so back to our main form where we'll create our t-datasnap result descendant class. As demonstrated, our getDate method returns the current date as an ISO 8601 formatted datetime string. However, we'll want to store it as a normal datetime property in our descendant class. In addition, we'll need to override the virtual abstract load value method to load the datetime property. First, we'll add the class declaration. We want to make sure that we make the value property published so that runtime type information is available for the property. And now for the implementation of the load value method. The setProperty method is a special base t-object method that can be used to assign a value to a published property in a class instance using just the property name. The method uses runtime type information in order to perform the published property assignment. Okay, so now we've got our result class built. We now just need to add two controls, a neat little animation procedure, and two event handlers, and we're done. The two controls that we need are a button to kick off the request and a t-calendar to assign the result to. We'll make the calendar be invisible because we're only going to show it if we get a successful response from the datasnap server. I'll now add a little animation procedure that will cause the calendar control to drop down from the top of the form when the server request executes successfully. Elevate Web Builder 2 currently offers animation primitives for moving and sizing controls. We'll be adding higher level animation methods like the following in the coming months. The first event handler that we need is for the button's onClick event. We'll just double click on the button to add it. Inside of the onClick event handler, we're just hiding the calendar if it's visible and then executing the server request. The second event handler that we need is for the server request's onComplete event. Again, we'll just double click on the server request to add it. As you can see, we always check for a positive HTTP status code first. These status codes can be found in the web HTTP unit where the tserver request component resides. Then, we create an instance of our descendant result class and assign the server request to it. We can then assign the value property of our class instance directly to the calendar's selected date property. And after all of that, we'll go ahead and drop the calendar down from the top and make it bounce. Let's now save the application and run it in the IDE to see if everything works as expected. We'll click on the Get Date button to test the request. And as you can see, the calendar control drops down and our request is working as expected. I hope you've enjoyed watching, and thanks again to Embarcadero Technologies for allowing us to show you a little about Elevate Web Builder. You will find a link to the source code for both the RAD Studio and Elevate Web Builder projects, as well as relevant links to our website and more information about Elevate Web Builder below the video. As always, please feel free to contact us at any time with any questions or comments you may have.
So I had a few questions before maybe others put questions in the question log. Awesome demo, love the integration and showing data snap and then putting a web front end. Can you connect to other things? Like, can you connect to Delphi or CBuilder DLLs or I guess REST servers and other things besides data snap?
Sure. I mean, you can connect to basically EWB client applications. Kind of are a thing unto themselves. You can write applications that don't do anything other than save their data to the local storage in the browser, and then simply just run in the browser. They don't communicate with the backend at all, other than being loaded from there. Likewise, you can connect to any API that you can affect. Anything you can call normally with JavaScript, you can call with EWB. Or with an EWB client application. Also, in addition to that, we also have dataset adapters that allow you to hook up things like Firebug and other T-dataset descendants so that they can generate the JSON that EWB uses for its automated dataset handling for transactions and things like that. So there's not a lot of limitations to what you can do with it. It's really just a matter of what you want to do.
And you said the words, so JSON. Can you also accept XML data?
Oh, sure. Yeah, you can basically anything you can normally accept with JavaScript, you can accept with EWB. It uses the same. The server request is effectively a wrapper around the XML HTTP request instance in the browser, or an instance in the browser. So yeah, and we also have serialization for XML and everything too that normally is in the browser. So if you want to use XML, you can use that also. Okay,
and then the IDE runs on Windows. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
The development environment. Okay.
Yeah.
But deployment, you could deploy since it's HTML5, JavaScript, CSS. You can put those apps anywhere.
Yep. Yeah. It's actually only two files. It's actually an HTML loader file and the JavaScript file, and that's it. It keeps latency really low, so you only have two files to load.
Okay, and as far as then deployment, if you use some JavaScript libraries or other things, you need to make sure those are found wherever you deploy to.
But the project manager in EWB allows you to hook those in, so you can just add those in, and then it will automatically make sure when you hit the deploy button, it will automatically copy that also along with the application.
Excellent. So, and it went by real fast, I know, because it's meant to be a spotlight to intrigue everybody. And Ray, I'll get to your questions. I see them over there. So the controls that you visualize really under the covers, if people have other HTML5 JavaScript-based controls, or they want to do audio, video, or other HTML5 things, there's either wrappers for that, or again, you can do it through code. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, you can write an external interface to anything that's in external JavaScript. Ideally, we'd like people to write components or controls in EWB, native EWB Object Pascal. However, you can wrap external controls rather easily. We just came out with 2.01 this week, and it has a wrapper around the Google Maps API, for example, and that's something that has to load a dynamic JavaScript API, wait for a callback to say that it's been loaded, and then go ahead and use it in an EWB control. So that's probably one of the most extreme examples of having to wrap a pretty large external API.
Yep. Okay, so Ray asks, is there a trial version?
Yes, absolutely. The only limitation on the trial version is that you can only run applications or projects in the IDE itself. You can't run them in external browsers.
Have you tested against all the different browsers out there, or are there certain ones that you support and certain versions? I know I always get crossed up in which version of which browser has which HTML, which JavaScript engine, and so on.
Right. Well, that's one of the main benefits of using something like EWB is that we take care of that hassle for you. Although I got to say, it's becoming less and less of a hassle every year, because it's really starting to solidify and standardize in a quite nice manner, because everything's pretty compliant now. IE tends to be the one that's a little dragging, a little bit behind, but not as cutting edge as you would like. But that's going to change, obviously, with Microsoft Edge. So, but we support them all: Opera, Safari, Firefox, Chrome, IE, and it's IE 9 or higher also.
Okay, gotcha. Ray's also asking, are there links somewhere on your site, or is there like a full site, someone who's built a complex site using EWB?
Well, one thing we have examples up on the website. They tend to be smaller examples. One thing to point out, though, is EWB is really not for building websites as opposed to web applications. And it sounds like a fine distinction, but it is a pretty big difference when you talk about who your audience is. A website normally wants to be search engine friendly, and a web application is not going to be that. A web application is going to be something that is more of a line of business type of application. Something that might be like for your support portal, something that where you don't want the content necessarily indexed, because an EWB application generates all the content you see on the screen is generated dynamically. There's no static HTML. It very much resembles a desktop app running in a browser from that respect.
Let's see. Alf is looking for price, but where would people look for price? I guess under sales, maybe?
It's $359 US.
So Ray's asking, how do you fire off an application using a URL?
You simply type in the browser. Like I said, there's two files. And they both have the same root name.
Sorry about that. I think it was on the message window. I saw generating in the message window. I think it was, in your case, project1.html and project1.js, something like that.
Yeah. So you would basically use project1.html as your loader URL. There you go.
Okay, I just put local host in there as well, just for the heck of it.
Yeah.
Or whatever your path is on your deployment server.
Right.
And tested on IIS, Apache, I guess.
Yeah, any web server you want, anything that can load up. Effectively, if it's a web server and it's running properly, it can serve up those two files.
I'll ask this question: what do you do about debugging?
Debugging is a little limited right now, because right now the debugger environments in the browsers are not exactly they're not exactly surfaced to external IDEs. Chrome's changing that quite a bit. There's the Chrome embedded framework, and there's been some great Delphi work done. And the name escapes me at this time, so I'm sorry. But somebody's done. Yeah, somebody did some porting of that also to Delphi. And there's some, I'm looking into to doing some things in that arena. One of the big holdups is the Chrome embedded framework is a bit large for EWB, but right now we use IE in the embedded browser that's in the IDE, and it's good enough for now. But we want to bring in debugging. We have source maps and everything, obviously, in the compiler. We know exactly how to map the the JavaScript code to the Object Pascal code, and they're actually very similar. But for now, you have to use the built-in debugger in the browser. Not, like I said, not a big deal because the code is very similar. But you can also print debugging messages and also from the running application so that they show up in the EWB IDE message view also. So you have a few options there. The main thing you'll find with EWB apps is you don't have to debug them nearly as much, though, is what you would expect. There's just not. Most of the stuff is really taking all the stuff under the covers. That is the stuff that really gets a little dicey is pretty much taken care of for you. So.
Yeah, in the past, I've used Firebug with Firefox.
Yeah, Firebug will work. Firefox, the main Firefox one tends to be a little slower than Firebug. I don't know why, but
yeah.
So I tend to use Firebug also.
Yeah. The other way is, of course, you put a label on and output values. That's the old print line.
Yeah, that's what EWB does. Is that there's just a simple procedure in the HTTP unit that allows you to call log output. That just takes a string, and you can also specify a different URL if you want to redirect the output to a specific EWB IDE instance, which is useful when you're debugging like tablet apps and stuff. You need to send it to a certain IP address on the network. Yeah, so you can just log out whatever information you want. I use that a lot for a lot of quick and dirty stuff before I actually, go into the actual browser debugger environment.
Yeah. So Alpha's asking, using Apache, defining how Apache should load pages sometimes gets tricky. Are there examples how to include the HTTPD definition file?
I'm not exactly sure what he's referring to there, but you shouldn't need to do anything other than just load it directly from the web server. I mean, the web server, as far as the web server rules itself, you really don't run into too many issues with that because you don't have multiple pages or anything. You have just the loader file, and that's it. Once it gets loaded from there, it's off and running. The only time it'll contact the web server after that point is if it needs any assets like images that you've included, web fonts, or anything like that you've included in your application that need to get loaded. Other than that, EWB won't contact the server other than any kind of server requests or things like that. But those are module level things because those aren't going to be handled by the web server itself. They'll be handled by PHP or whatever you've got running as your web application on the back end.
Okay, this is from Alf. Using WAMP Server, I'm not familiar for local web page work before releasing it to the world. Is it tested with WAMP Server?
Yeah, LAMP is the Linux stack. It's again, the web server doesn't really matter. I mean, the only thing that's of concern when you're choosing a web server is if you do need to handle things like data sets on the back end, is to decide what back end web application development you're going to use, such as PHP, or we provide an Elevate Web Builder web server. Also, you can use obviously Web Broker with IIS. Any of those things will work. It's just really a matter of deciding which one you need. ASP, for example, is another one. Which one you want to use, and then being able to handle the JSON that goes back and forth between the two. It really is, once an EWB app loads, it really does act like a desktop application, in that the only time it requests anything is if it needs data, and that data is usually JSON.
Ray, I'm not sure. I thought we answered this one. He just did it twice. How would you fire it with a URL? And again, in your case, it was project1.html. So
yeah, it's same. Yeah, same.
I don't know if he's asking if he wants to execute a specific method or not. Like in a REST call, for example, but
right. Well, it wouldn't change the loader URL. That would be handled by like the T-server request. That's an AJAX request. So that would be the URL you would use would depend on what the REST API looks like, obviously.
So you mentioned the pricing. Is that an annual license, a subscription license?
that's the initial purchase price. That entitles you to a year of a year subscription and online support in the form of the support forms. And then after that, it's $99 a year for the support plan or for subscription. Excuse me.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean that's the more I can reuse, the better it is, and for our customers as well. The other thing, we had a conversation earlier today about what gets generated is a project HTML file and a project JavaScript file. So the deployment is very simple. Just put those two files on your IIS or Apache server, wherever you want to put it in virtual directories and so on, and you're ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep, and the thing is at first the one thing you'll notice is EWB when you produce an application, it looks a little large. I mean, the JavaScript that gets emitted is somewhat large, but once you turn on the compression and the compiler, you really get some really small applications, especially compared to anything else that you would do with actual JavaScript. The compression is very, very aggressive.
I always get concerned about HTML rendering engines in browsers and JavaScript engines in browsers. Should developers worry about browsers and JavaScript engines that they might run into?
No. It's with Elevate Web Builder, no. We basically take care of all of that. We abstract UI layers abstracted on two different levels. One between design time and runtime, so that when you write code, if say you're a component developer and you write a component for Elevate Web Builder and you install it, you are writing code that runs at design time and runtime. So there's that going on, but that's abstracted out, so that's basically the same code for both. And then when you're at runtime in the actual browser itself, the UI layer abstracts out all of the intricacies of dealing with the browser DOM, which can be, in the past, has been extremely problematic, but has gotten a lot better. So it's made our job a lot easier, but there's still a lot of things that are odd or weird about it.
Do I have to worry about which version of the web server that I might want to run on? Is it IIS a certain version or Apache a certain version?
No. The only thing you have to worry about in terms of the web server is just essentially how you're going to handle any kind of back-end code if you want to have back-end processing. Like, for example, with Elevate Web Builder, we have data sets and data set functionality that there's a built-in architecture there. But if, say, you wanted to expose a REST API for the EWB front end, like, say, with DataSnap or what have you, it's really just a matter of whatever you're using, whether it can run on that particular web server. EWB doesn't really care. It's running on the front end and doesn't even know what it's accessing.
Okay. Now, when I look at the home page here, I see the Find Your Solution section. Can you walk us through maybe what each of those links are for? I mean, I guess part of it is obvious. Delphi and C Builder developers, Visual Studio developers, maybe doing some .NET work or some Delphi work and so on. Are these related to all of the Elevate software products, or if I care about Elevate Web Builder 2, do I want to go to web developer area, or?
Yeah, you want to go right to web developer. The other ones those specifically deal with our database engine products and how they deal with the native, not with Visual Studio, that's managed, but with like PHP, that's Elevate DB. And then our ODBC drivers and such. But yeah, for EWB, the web developers is the one you want. Although we probably should have that for the Delphi and the other developers also. I probably need to change that.
Yeah, there's such an affinity. I mean, when you look at the language, if nothing else, your muscle memory on the keyboard and the clicking on the mouse with the object inspector and so on, you're gonna in my mind, going to feel very at home. But I just wanted to make sure, but since I've got you there, this is about Elevate Web Builder 2. But DB, can you say a few words about the database products?
Sure. Well, our oldest product, people probably know to some extent, which is DB ISOM. That's been around since '98. We were in Delphi. I think Delphi 2 was still kicking around at that point, and that would have been 2. And that's been around since then in various forms. And now we have a complete DB ISOM database server and ODBC driver and basically a lot of access methods that way. That's pretty much been static for a while. Our newer database engine products, Elevate DB, and that one is a more relational, full-featured, especially when it comes to SQL database engine, and that is available in for Delphi and C++ Builder native, and also for .NET as a managed code data provider. It's also available as a PHP extension, both in Windows and Linux, and an ODBC driver under Windows. Both of those are supported natively in Elevate Web Builder, and both of those compile directly into any Delphi or C++ Builder application. So they're about 3 megs in size, so they're very small.
Okay. And then back to Elevate DB, you showed, how the data snap server can generate JSON, and then you can consume the JSON and do things like whatever the dates and other things. Is there data types that I might have in a server or a DLL or whatever that Elevate can't deal with? I'm thinking, some generic type or...
If you're talking strictly in terms of JSON, then not really. JSON's somewhat limited in the data types it supports, and it's kind of one of the things that's nice about it is it supports Booleans, strings, numbers, and we support date and times in those, but they're basically strings or numbers. So that's really all there is to it. So as far as like with Elevate Web Builder, and its data set handling in the front-end client application, if you don't want to use the automated stuff we have available, we do publish the JSON reference is published, and it tells you exactly what you need to be able to generate and consume. And in addition to that, I didn't have time to show it in this demo here, but we do provide EWB data set adapter, a data set adapter component that you can install into Delphi, and that's free. And you can use it with WebBroker or DataSnap, and it will allow you to say, for example, hook up a FireDAC data set, and it will automatically spit out the data set JSON that EWB needs, and also consume the transactions for an EWB transaction.
Okay, and then you mentioned, I think, I can build extensions for EWB if I wanted to do some special kind of processing.
Sure. We also include an EWB web server. It's a basic little web server binary that it's for medium size or lower, but it does have the ability to create modules that basically work like a web broker, a SAPI module. It's a DLL, and those natively can do a lot of things, obviously, because they're integrated in with EWB. But we do provide that free of charge. So if somebody doesn't really care to use anything bigger, they can use that also.
And I guess Elevate DB doesn't care if my DataStep server is using HTTPS. Then on the website, that's my IIS or Apache that has to deal with that transport, right?
Yeah. It's one of the things that when you first start doing the web development is it seems somewhat limiting to some extent, but then when you start to get into it, it's kind of nice because there's the simplistic nature of it tends to make things very easy as far as how do I do things, and that's one of them is if you want a secure connection, use an HTTPS URL. If you don't use that. We always recommend that you do, especially doing data, but it's a very simple, easy way to be able to have encrypted connections without having to worry about the details of it.
Another thing that comes up in some of the sessions where we talk JSON, people think about large data sets or large data that they might need to send over, and the size that might explode when they have to convert all that to JSON. Is there some mechanism for if I did something on both sides to send binary stream over, stream file, memory stream?
Well, no. JSON's not too bad. XML is really bad in terms of overhead, but JSON's not too bad. It's pretty basic, or the amount of extraneous formatting is pretty low. So it's not too bad. I've tested with EWB with 10,000 row data sets and such, and they come across pretty quick, and that's not even including any kind of gzip compression that might be going on with the browser or the web server. So it's not too big of a deal, and usually you want to limit, what you're sending over to the browser to some degree. But with Elevate Web Builder, it's kind of nice though too, is because things like our grid, for example, which can be data bound to any data set, they're virtual. So you don't have any issues with. If you wanted to load 10,000 rows, you could. You're not going to have to worry about it trying to create 10,000 sets of DOM elements that are locking up your browser now.
No, I always tell developers, think about how much data you really want to send, and especially over the web or even mobile, you can always pull data on demand when you need it along the way.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's very easy with Elevate Web Builder with data sets to create parameterized data sets that effectively are parameterized query on the back end that just do a simple substitution on the parameters and either for pagination or anything that's filtered data sets.
And I think you said this earlier, I could also include my own custom or some JavaScript library if it wanted to do something special with some type of data or whatever, as long as I had something on the JavaScript side that I could use with my Elevate Web Builder application. I could have whatever I had on the other side doing the same thing, right?
Yes, absolutely. Controls are a little dicier than just straight up, JavaScript code because, of course, with controls you do have to take into account that Elevate Web Builder does want it. It has a global event manager and things like that for performance reasons. So there are some things that, with event management that have to be taken care of that are different than just straight up code. But Elevate Web Builder's compiler allows you to define external interfaces to external JavaScript code. And what that does is that gives you the ability to access JavaScript code but still allow the compiler to check all of your code. The external interfaces allow you to have the compiler go ahead and still check your code and take care of the differences like case sensitivity and things like that JavaScript is obviously sensitive about. So that way you don't have a situation where you just basically dump JavaScript code into your application in a way that kind of undoes all of the nice things that you have by having an Object Pascal compiler. So that's one of the nice things too. Is we did it with like Google Maps, the Google Maps API, for example. There's an entire unit in Elevate Web Builder that effectively is the interface to the Google Maps API, similar to the way the Windows API is abstracted with Delphi.
Well, Tim, thank you so much, and thank you everyone. But Tim, this time you get the last word. Any parting words for everybody before we say goodbye for now?
Oh, sure. Well, just download a trial version. They're free to download on the website. There are some limitations compared to the regular product, but nothing that would prevent you from trying it out in terms of development. And we need component developers, and there's plenty of room for components. So if you're a component developer or want to develop components, get in touch with us, and we'll set you up with a copy. So.
Excellent. Thanks, Tim, and thank you, everyone, for being on the Elevate Web Builder Technology Partner Spotlight.
Thanks, everybody.